you're able to see my screen. You see my screen? Can I get the confirmation, please? Hello? Am I audible? Strange. Can you guys can hear me? Yes. Okay. Thanks. All right. Okay. So we'll get discuss about we'll start discussing about the load balancer. Okay, that is Azure load balancer. So okay, here we have two types of load balancer, like public load balancer and a internal load balancer. And we'll also discuss about what are their use cases, like when do we use the public load balancer and when do we use the internal load balancer. Okay, thanks. And we'll also see certain load balancing SKUs. Okay, so we have two types of SKUs. Okay, that is basic and standard. Okay, so we'll discuss about the both differences, because this is very very important when you discuss about the load balancers, right? And we'll discuss about these concepts in detail today as part of today's agenda. Okay, what is the load balancer and the types of the load balancer? Okay, so we have an internal load balancer and external load balancer, and we'll also see certain basic differences between the load balancers SKUs. Okay, so before that, okay, let me quickly walk you through certain documents here. So a load balancer will be working on a OSI layer 4. Okay, so for the people who are coming from an IIT background, okay, layer 4 means, okay, and a networking, okay, we have a different layers. Let's say I'll go walk you through certain basic documentation here. Okay, so if I go to this particular OSI layers, okay, let's say let me open any one of the thing here. Yeah. So probably if you see here, okay, so we have a physical layer, data layer, network layer, transport layer, session layer, persistence layer, and application layer. I'm not going to talk about in detail about each and everything. So just focus on this particular transport layer and application layer, because whatever the load balances we are going to talk about, so they will be operating on this particular two layers. So later I will be sharing this particular document also. Probably you can go through in detail what exactly it is about. Okay, so you could see, okay, transmit the data using transmission protocol including TCP and UDP. Okay, so TCP is system defined protocols, and UDP is nothing but a user defined protocol. Okay, so this particular load balancer will be supported on a both. Okay, so that is what, okay, this meaning is about. This particular load balancer will be operating on a OSI layer 4, that is TCP and UDP. And it also relays the health probes to determine the status of the backend pool. So generally what we do is, okay, why do we use the load balancer is, the functionality of the load balancer is, okay, it will distribute the incoming traffic to the multiple healthy backend pools. Let's say I have a website. Let's say my website name is abcd.com. Okay, I have hosted my website on these three servers. Okay, so if at all if any user traffic comes, okay, so I have to distribute the load. Let's say I'm a user A. Okay, I'm a user 1, and when I try to access this particular website, okay, so by default, okay, the traffic will be routed back to this particular VM. Okay, let's say there are 100 users are coming, and 100 user traffic, okay, navigated to this particular server. This particular server may be, goes down, your application performance may go down, right? So to avoid those scenarios, okay, what we are going to do is, okay, we are going to use the load balancer. What this particular load balancer does is, okay, based on the certain rules, certain health rules what we create, it will distribute the traffic. Okay, we can keep a condition saying that if this particular server is busy, okay, so please route the traffic to the next server. Even if this particular server is busy, please route the traffic to the next server. Okay, so we'll be keeping certain condition to route the traffic to the another servers. Okay, the functionality of this particular load balancer is it will distribute the incoming traffic to the multiple healthy backend pools. We'll be adding this number of VMs as a backend pool of this particular load balancer. Okay, so this is what it is meaning. Relays and a health probes to determine the status of backend pool. So here, okay, we'll be defining certain health probes to check the health status of this particular servers. And as you could see, distribute the traffic according to the load balancing rules. So as I mentioned just now, if at all if you wanted to route the traffic to the number of servers, we'll be creating certain rules. Based on the rules, that incoming traffic will be distributed equally to the backend pools servers. So this is the concept of a load balancer. Once again, I'm repeating. Load balancer will be working on operates on a OSI layer 4, that is TCP and UDP. The main functionality of the load balancer is it will distribute the incoming traffic to the multiple backend healthy pools. It will distribute the load. Okay, so I was discussing about the two types of load balancers, right? So here, okay, we have a two types of load balancer. One is like a public load balancer, other one is like a internal load balancer. Okay, so when you say how many types of load balancer we have, okay, you can talk about these two: public load balancer and internal load balancer. So when I say public load balancer, it is having a public interfacing, and it should have a public IP as a front end IP. Okay, so if I go back here, if at all if I wanted to access this particular server application which is hosted on the servers, I should be using a load balancer public IP. I'm not using the VM's public IP. Okay, so if I come back here, you could see here the definition: distribute the traffic getting a public IP address across backend VMs. That means for the public load balancer, when you create a public load balancer, as a front end IP, you will be having a public IP. So that using that public IP, okay, we'll be trying to access this website within a browser or from internet. And that time what it does is, okay, so this particular web server is running on a port number 80. This is the port number, that is HTTP port number. If it is running on a HTTPS, that is double 43, you have to keep it here. And the traffic will be routed to the healthy server based on the certain load balancing rules. And here you could see the difference is like front end has one or more public IPs, backend VMs have a private IP address. In case of public load balancer, for the load balancer as a front end IP will be having a public IP, and the backend VMs will be having a private IP. Let me compare the same with the internal load balancer. So internal load balancer will be having a private IP as a public, front end IP. That means, so for this particular load balancer, will be having a IP, okay, to access this particular backend pools. Okay, so in case of internal load balancer, we'll be having a private IP, not the public IP. So here you could see distribute the traffic targeting to your private IP address across the backend VMs. And front end has one or more private IP address, and backend VMs has a private IP address. Both the front end IP and backend VMs will be having a private IP only. Let me talk about the use case. So public load balancer will be using for the internet facing. Let's say if you have a website hosted, and if you wanted to access this website, okay, we'll be using the public load balancer. Whereas, okay, internal load balancer, so let's say for your application, for your web application, if you have a backend databases, okay, so the databases will be hosted on a backend, right? Okay, those databases are not published to the public, not exposed to the public. So to route the traffic to the databases from your application and to distribute the load equally, okay, among the databases, okay, we use the internal load balancer. And this 1433 is the port number to access the SQL database. Okay, so these are the two major differences between public load balancer and internal load balancer. And you can see the some of the supports, okay, what exactly load balancer does. Okay, it should be like a within a virtual network. Let's say if at all if you wanted to add a multiple VMs as a backend pool, those VMs should be in a single virtual network. It will not support, okay, if the VMs are in a multiple VNets. Same thing, it also for a cross premises virtual network, and for multi-tier applications and for line of business applications. Okay, let me talk about one by one them. Okay, for a cross premises virtual networks. Let's say when I say cross premises virtual networks, okay, if you have any pairing connectivity between any one of the networks, then not only then also okay we can add the VMs as a backend pool of this particular load balancer. And for multi-tier application, let's say if you have a three-tier application, let's say web tier, app tier, and DB tier. Okay, so if you wanted to distribute the traffic for the different servers, okay, we can achieve it. Okay, so for line of business applications, okay, this is something okay I need to check. Yeah, but anyways, okay, so these are the high level things okay that load balancer is supporting. And coming back to the SKU, okay, so here we have two types of SKUs. Okay, one is like a basic and standard, which is very very important. Okay, so okay, when you talk about load balancer in the interviews, okay, definitely you might expect this particular question. Okay, let me walk you through the certain differences here. I'll go back to the portal, and I would say Azure Load Balancer SKU. Okay, you can go to this particular document and you could see the SKU comparisons. If I come down, okay, here you could see the standard load balancer and basic load balancer. So as a backend pool, okay, so when we create a load balancer, right? Okay, if I go back here, if I go up, here we are adding the VMs as a backend pool for the load balancer. Okay, so in case of standard load balancer, we can have up to 1,000 instances. That means as a backend pool, we can add 1,000 VMs in case of standard load balancer. That is standard SKU. But when in case of basic load balancer, we can add up to only 300 instances. Instance is nothing but a VMs. Okay. And this is something like a backend pool endpoints. Okay. So any virtual machines are virtual scale sets in a single virtual network. And virtual machines in a single availability set are a virtual machine scale set. Okay. So this is also very important. Let's say if you wanted to add a VMs as a backend pool, in case of standard load balancer, okay, that VMs could be like anything like either VMs or a VMSS. I think okay we haven't discussed about the VMSS, that is virtual machine scale set. It should be within a network, like within a network, okay, it could be in a different subnets or whatever it is. But in case of basic load balancer, those VMs should be in a availability set. Let's say if at all if I wanted to add more than one VM, let's say 5 VMs or 10 VMs, those 10 VMs if at all if I wanted to add as a backend pool, those VMs should be part of single availability set. If not, I will be not able to add all the VMs. That is the major difference. Okay, so once again I'm repeating, this is the major difference. Okay, so I'll walk you through the demos also today. So whenever you try to add a VMs as a backend pool, so you can add a multiple VMs and VMSs which are part of single network in case of standard load balancer. Let's say if at all I wanted to add a 10 VMs, I can add a 10 VMs okay in a single network. That means okay in a single network in different subnets, I can add those VMs and I can add the backend pool. Those I can add those VMs as a backend pool of this particular standard load balancer. But in case of basic load balancer, if at all if you wanted to add a multiple VMs, those VMs should be part of single availability set. And if you talk about health probes, standard load balancer will support okay HTTPS also. But whereas this particular basic will not support HTTPS. And we need to create a health probes and the rest of the topics okay you can go through. And the zone redundant and zone front ends for inbound and outbound traffic. Like in if at all if you wanted to go with the zone redundant, that is availability zones, which is available for the standard load balancer, but in case okay with the basic load balancer it is not applicable. And you can go through the certain things here, and you could see the SLA. Okay, so with the standard load balancer, Microsoft is guaranteeing you almost 99.99% SLA, but whereas in case of basic, okay, Microsoft not is not guaranteeing anything, right? And you can see certain limitations also here and other things. But the major differences is these two, or I could say these three, that you should remember. Okay, standard load balancer will support okay 1,000 VMs as a backend pool. Basic load balancer will support only 300. So when you wanted to add multiple VMs as a backend pool for the standard load balancer, so we can add it. But in a basic load balancer, if you wanted to add multiple VMs as a backend pool, those VMs should be part of availability set. Okay. So let me come back here. So this is about SKUs. Let me walk you through here. SKUs are not mutable. That means let's say once I create a load balancer with a basic load balancer, I cannot change it to the standard load balancer. Okay, or if, let's say if I create a standard load balancer, I cannot change it to the basic load balancer. Okay, that is like a not mutable. So an Azure VM availability set or Azure VM scale set can be referred once to, not both. Okay, for adding this backend pools. A load balancer rules cannot span two virtual networks. That's what I said, right? So we cannot create a load balancer rules for the two networks. Okay, we can add a backend pool of a servers okay, in a single networks. Okay, we'll also show you these demos. Okay, don't get confused. There is no charge for the basic load balancer. Okay, when you create a basic load balancer, okay, this load balancer is a free of cost. The standard load balancer is charged upon the number of rules and the data processed. So once we create a load balancer, we'll be creating certain rules. Upon those rules, okay, the pricing will be calculated for the standard load balancer. We'll also see that one now. And this is how okay we add the VMs into the backend pool. I think okay this count was wrong. Okay, for the basic okay it was 300, and for the standard okay we can add up to 1000 VMs. And when you create a VMs, okay, when you create a load balancer, so here we have a option to choose the backend pool. There we can go ahead and choose a number of availability set single virtual machine or virtual machine scale set. So here you could see certain load balancing rules how we can create it. We'll also see your demo upon this particular front end IP, backend pool, and health pro. And we'll also creating certain session persistence like these are the common things. Okay, so this particular load balancer is working on. We call it as a 5-tuple hash. Upon this particular 5-tuple hash, like a source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port, and certain protocols, this particular traffic will be routed to the backend pools. This also will be discussing now. Okay, and you can see certain health props. Okay, how do we create? And what are the intervals okay that we are going to create, what is this particular protocols about, and we'll also discuss about them. So let me quickly go ahead and have a demo for the load balancer. I'll go back to the portal, and I'll let's see. Before that, I do have any VMs up and running here. Yes, I do have a VMs, but I'm not sure whether these VMs are created on the same network. Let me quickly check. These two are Windows. If I go back here, it is hosted on a on-prem VM VNet, but I think it will be different. Let's see this here. Yeah, this is something different network. Let me do one thing. Okay, I'll go ahead and create a no networks, two virtual machines only. So before that, okay, let me go ahead and create a load balancer. Okay, I'll say load balancer on the top. Okay, here I could see the load balancer, and here you could see okay certain technical definitions. Okay, let me create a load balancer. Okay, here you could see the load balancer. Okay, Azure load balancer layer 4 load balancer that distribute the incoming traffic among the healthy virtual machines instances. This is a high level definition. Okay, and let me create a new resource group here. I would say load balancer RG01, and let me give certain name here, and I would say demo load balancer 01. LB is nothing but a load balancer. I'm just giving a short name. And let's say I wanted to create in a Southeast Asia region. Okay, let me go ahead and choose the Southeast Asia. Okay, here is the Southeast Asia region, and here you could see internal load balancer and public load balancer types. Okay, if you wanted to see their use cases, you can just go to this navigation. Okay, you will be navigated to the Microsoft documentation. Okay, what is Azure load balancer, and what is the difference between public load balancer and internal or private load balancer? Okay, so this is what okay we discussed. Okay, this is what okay demo that I'm going to present now. Okay, creating a public load balancer and creating two VMs and enabling the web server on top of it, and adding the VMs as a backend pool of the load balancer, and we'll try to see how the traffic is routed here. Okay, let me come back here. Let me go with the public load balancer, and default I'll go with the standard load balancer instead of basic, and I'm going with the regional. This global load balancer I think okay Microsoft has introduced recently. and this is for useful for the cross region. Okay, if at all if you wanted to distribute the load between the cross region, like for the load balancer we have few certain supported regions. So whereas if you wanted to load the traffic to those regions, okay, so we can uh, route the traffic. Let's say these are the home region and these are the peering region. That means, okay, let's say if I create my one server in a, let's say, West US, I can route the traffic to the another server, another web server which is hosted in a. These are the peering regions. Okay, we can also route the traffic to the central India also. Okay, so this is something like a new feature. Okay, Microsoft is coming up with, that is for the cross region. So probably yeah, we'll discuss it later. So for now, let me go with a regional. That means, okay, routing the traffic within a region. Okay, so for this, okay, as a front-end IP, I need to create a public IP since it is a public load balancer. If I keep an internal, okay, here it will ask me to have a private IP. Okay, so by default, it will take the virtual network private IP. So let me go with the public IP here for now. And here, okay, let me create a public IP, and I would say demo load balancer public IP and 01. And by default, since we went with a standard load balancer, the IP allocation will be static. That means this IP will not be changed. Okay, so if at all if you wanted to use the IPv6 address, you can go ahead and choose yes. And for that again you have to create a one more public IP. So for now I'm keeping it as a no. And routing, okay, so it will be depends on the Microsoft network or internet. You can choose any one. When you say Microsoft Internet, okay, the traffic will be routed with a Microsoft backbone network. When you say Internet, okay, the traffic will be routed via Internet. So let's go with the Microsoft backbone network itself. And the tags, I'm not going anything. And let me review and create a load balancer. So validation is done. Let me create it. Okay, to show you a demo. Okay, so I'll walk you through certain these things. Okay, let me come back here. Let me copy this image. Let me put it here. Okay, I'll walk you through this particular demo now. So I just created a public load balancer and it's a standard load balancer. So I'm going to create a two virtual machines, okay, in a same region, that is Southeast Asia. Make sure that your load balancers and your VM should be in the same region. And okay, I'm going to enable a web server. If you remember in the beginning, we have enabled a web server for the VMs and we are able to access those web servers using the public IP of the VM. So I'm going to create a two VMs now, and I'll enable a web server, and I'll add these two servers as a backend pool of load balancer. And when I try to access the load balancer public IP, let's see how the traffic will be routed back to this particular two servers. Okay, I'm going to have a demo for this now. So to achieve this, let me go ahead and create a two servers, and then okay, I'll enable the web server on top of it. Let me come back here. So I'll go back to this resource group, and in here itself I'm going to create a two servers now. So let me create a go to the marketplace, and let me try to choose this particular Windows server. If it is giving me a classic model, I'll go back and do a different way now. It is giving a classic model. So let me go ahead and go to the marketplace again. So this time I'll go with the compute, and I can go to the virtual machine. So here, okay, I'm creating in a same resource group. I'll just name this VM name as a VM1, and I'm going to host into the Southeast Asia. Okay, I'm not keeping any availability here, and let's say this I'll go with the not the Visual Studio one. I'll go with the normal Windows 2016 data center. And this particular size is okay. Let's say I'll go with a very minimal one. Okay, one virtual CPU and 3.5 GB RAM. Okay, so coming to the username, let's say I'll give the username as a Azure user, and I'll give the password, and the rest of the details I'm going with the same. And make sure, okay, so here whatever the network we are going to create, other VM also we have to create in the same networks. Okay, let me review and create it for now. Okay, let me create it. So this is what I'm going to achieve now. Okay, so maybe let me keep this way. Azure public load balancer. I'll go to the images. Yeah, this will be better. Let me copy this image and let me put it. Yeah. So this is what I'm going to achieve now. But here, okay, so they're adding the VMs into the same availability set. Okay, I'm not going to create the VMs in availability set. If at all, if you wanted to, if you create a basic load balancer, and when you create a basic load balancer, and if you wanted to add the VMs as a backend pool, so we have to keep the VMs into the availability set. So I'm not going to take this particular concept. Forget about this availability set, but I'm going to create a two VMs now. I'm just naming it as a VM1 and VM2, and after creating it I'll be going and enabling the web server on the VMs, and I will add these VMs as a backend pool of the load balancer. Okay, so I'll try to access these two servers, okay, from internet using the public IP of the load balancer, and it should be navigating me the traffic to the VM1 and VM2 upon the load balancer rules what I create. Okay, so this is what, okay, we are going to see a demo now. So let's say, okay, so I think, okay, VM1 is also created. Yeah, so I should be creating a VM2 also in the same VNet. Okay, so here I have created a one VNet, right? So I should be creating a VM2 also in the same network, maybe in a different subnet. Okay, let me go ahead and create a one more VM, and I'll just name it as a VM2. Okay, so here, okay, I'll just name this VM as a VM2, and I'm going to host in the same region, that is Southeast Asia. And I'm going with the same image, that is operating system and the size. And let's say I'll use the username as a Azure user, and let me give some password. And make sure, okay, you should be choosing the same network. And if you see here, it has taken a same network, okay, and it is creating a no public IP. That is fine. Let me go ahead and create it. If the VMs are not part of same network, okay, we cannot add them as a backend pool. If you wanted to add a multiple VMs as a backend pool also, let's say even 100 or 1000 VMs, those VMs should be in the same network. Maybe different subnets, but a network should be the same. Okay, so to achieve this demo, I have created a load balancer, and I have created two VMs also, which are part of same network. Okay, here you could see this is complete one single network. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is, okay, I'm going to enable a web server on both the servers. Okay, let me come back to the portal. I'll go back to this load balancer, and first I'll go back to the VM1, and I'll enable the web server on VM1. Okay, so I'll copy this public IP, and take uh, I'll take a RDP or maybe MSTSC, anything will is fine. It's this is my username and password, and I'm logged into the VM1. Let me click on yes. So in the meantime, if you don't remember the PowerShell command to enable the web server, okay, you can just do Microsoft Docs. Okay, so Azure VM Docs, if you see, okay, so let's say I'll go to the Azure portal, creating a virtual machine using portal, and if I keep coming down, okay, here I could see the PowerShell command to enable a web server. Okay, so install Icon Windows feature. Okay, the name will be web server, and it will include the all the management tools. Let me simply copy this, go back to your VM, and here, okay, just open a PowerShell. Okay, so here is the PowerShell, and you can just paste this particular command, okay, to enable a web server. Okay, I'm just pasting it, and if at all if you wanted to validate, okay, whether the web server is installed or not, okay, so you can go to this particular this PC C folder. Okay, so here within a C folder, a separate folder will be installed with a name called inetpub. Okay, so at this moment, okay, we don't see any folder called inetpub, and once it is done, you will be able to see that particular folder called inetpub. Okay, so let's say let me do a refresh. Okay, it is still performing. It is collecting the data, and it is started the installation of the web server. Okay, once it is done with 100%, you will be able to see that particular folder here. Okay, you will be seeing on the top. Okay, in the meantime, I'll quickly log into the VM2 also, and there, okay, I will, do perform the same action. Okay, let me go back to the VM2. I'll come back here and I'll go to the VM2 and copy the VM2 IP also. Okay, so let me take one more RDP connection here. So I'll put the public IP of the VM2 and let's enter the username and password, and I'm logged into the VM2 now. I'll come back here and I'll go to the VM2 and copy the VM2 IP also. Okay, so let me take one more RDP connection here. So I'll put the public IP of the VM2 and let's enter the username and password, and I'm logged into the VM2 now. So let me know once you're able to see my screen. Or not? Okay, so you can go to this particular this PC C folder. Okay, so here within a C folder, a separate folder will be installed with a name called inetpub. Okay, so at this moment, okay, we don't see any folder called inetpub, and once it is done, you will be able to see that particular folder called inetpub. Okay, so let's say let me do a refresh. Okay, it is still performing. It is collecting the data, and it is started the installation of the web server. Okay, once it is done with 100%, you will be able to see that particular folder here. Okay, you will be seeing on the top. Okay, in the meantime, I'll quickly log into the VM2 also, and there, okay, I will do perform the same action. Okay, let me go back to the VM2. I'll come back here and I'll go to the VM2 and copy the VM2 IP also. Okay, so let me take one more RDP connection here. So I'll put the public IP of the VM2 and let's enter the username and password, and I'm logged into the VM2 now. Okay, so this is my VM2. Okay, and here, okay, let me open the PowerShell and I'll try to enable the same thing now. Okay, I'll go back here, copy the same PowerShell command, okay, to perform this particular action. I'll go back to the PowerShell, open a PowerShell. Let me minimize this server manager. Since we have taken a very minimal configuration, that one virtual CPU and 3.5 GB RAM, okay, it should be giving it will take some time to load. So here also, okay, I'm opening this particular C drive, and here I'll go to the this PC, and here if I go here, I should be able to see inetpub once it is installed. So let me navigate to the VM1 meantime. Okay, I'll go back here, and if I see this particular installation is done, and I should be able to see a separate folder called inetpub. Okay, just to validate, okay, so I'll be able to see these five folders. Okay, just to identify this is a VM1, I'm going to change the certain headers here. Okay, I will go ahead and change the certain HTML document here, and I'll just open it with a certain notepad. Okay, so here, okay, as a header, what I would say is, okay, so I would say this is VM1. Okay, and I'll say, and I'll close it. Okay, let me close the entire thing. Okay, I'm done with the VM1. Same way, okay, let me navigate to the VM2, and within a VM2 it is still performing it. If I do refresh here, I should be able to see that folder called inetpub. Can you see? I'm able to see that folder called inetpub now. So once it is done with a 100%, I'll go ahead and change certain header here also, and I'll just name it as a VM. This is VM2, just to identify whenever we route the traffic. Okay, so this is also done. So let me go ahead and change certain header of this particular web server. I'll open the HTML document. I'll go open with it, and I'll open with a notepad, and here as a header I'll say this is VM2. Let me close this, and I'll come back here. So if at all I wanted to see those web servers, let's say I'll open up both the windows here, and in one window I'll open a VM1, in another window I'll open a VM2. Okay, so here I'm opened a VM2, so let me go ahead and open a VM1 here. And if at all if you wanted to access this web server, I should be allowing port number 80 here. I don't see any port 80. Let me quickly add a port 80. So since both the VMs are in the same network, okay, I think okay, adding one port number is enough, and I should be using the port destination port 80. It's a TCP port, and I'll give the default port, and I would say STP. And let me click on add. Okay, I'm adding a port number 80 just to allow the traffic from the internet which is running on a port number 80. Okay, so go back here. Let me copy this IP, and I'll put it here, and it should be navigating me to the web server of VM1, and it should be throwing me, giving me the web page here saying that with a header called this is VM1. At the same time, if I see here for this also, okay, I should be getting a default. Oh, here it is different energy. Okay, I should be, let's see here. So different energy it is. Okay, let me go ahead and allow the inbound port here also. That is port number 80, because my web server will be running on a port 80. Let me click on add. And once I'm done with this, okay, I can just copy this public IP, and I can put it here, and it might take some time. Okay, so it is 164, it is 42. It's a different IP. And you can see this is VM1. Okay, so once it is done and loaded everything, and if I go back and do a refresh here once again, taking some time it seems. Okay, it is still loading. So once it is loaded, and I should be able to see a header called this is VM2. Okay, as a web server. Okay, we just now added a load balancer role, right? So it might take some time because I just added a port number 80. Let me do refresh once again. Yes, here I could see this is VM2 and this is VM1. So now I am done with what do you say? Let me close it. Yeah. So I have created two VMs and I have enabled a web server. Okay. So now I will be adding these two servers as a backend pool of my load balancer, and I'll be creating certain load balancing rules. Upon those rules, my traffic should be routed back to the one VM or another VM, VM1 or VM2. Okay, so let me go back and see that now. Okay, I'll duplicate this window also, and I'll put it here. And when you add a VMs and a load balancer backend pool, whatever the IP we have for the VMs, okay, that will be replaced with a load balancer public IP. Let me show you that now. Okay, I'll go back here. I'll go back to the load balancer. Okay, this is the load balancer I currently I have. So if you see here, okay, for the load balancer as a front end IP, we have 23 dot, right? So this IP will be assigned to for the VMs, okay, once it is added as a backend pool. Okay, so for a VM1, currently I have a public IP as a 52.237, and same with the VM2, I have a public IP as a 52.139. So when I add these two VMs as a backend pool of the load balancer, it will be replaced with this particular public IP. Okay, we'll show you that now. Okay, so these are the five things, okay, we need to make, okay, once we create any load balancer. Okay, first thing is front end IP configuration, which we have already created a front end IP while creating a load balancer itself, and I need to add a backend pool. So this is the place, okay, where we go ahead and add the backend pools under a settings. So at this moment, okay, we don't have any backend pool, so let me go ahead and click on add. And when you create a backend pool, let's say I'll just name it as a BP as a backend pool, and you should choose a network. And here, okay, if you see, where it is allowing me to use only one virtual network. Okay, we cannot choose a multiple virtual network. That is the reason I said we have to create the VMs in a single network. You should not create a VMs in a multiple network. Otherwise, okay, we will be not able to choose the multiple VMs as a backend pool. So this is my network, and here you could see backend pool configuration as a public IP or a IP virtual. Okay, let me go with NICs here. And if you see, since I went with the standard load balancer, it is allowing me to add a backend pool as a virtual machine and virtual machine skill set. But in case of basic load balancer, it will not allow me to add the both. It will allow me to add either VMs or VMSs, or maybe even if a VMs also, those VMs should be part of single availability set. Okay, so for now, okay, there are no virtual machines. Okay, so let me click on no virtual machines are found in the Southeast Asia that matches the above criteria. Let's go with the public IP. Backend pool configuration NIC, IPv4 version. Let's see, my VMs are in the same, yeah, same network. Backend pool configuration NIC. Let me go with the public IP. Let me try to give the public IP here. I think Microsoft again made some changes. Let's try to put the public IP of the load balancer. These are the public IP of the VMs. Okay, I'm just giving the public IPs here. Okay, so let me try to click on add. Let's see. You can add only resources IP addresses in the virtual network. The configuration is associated with the IP address and will apply to any resource with public IP address assigned. Okay, IP address means, okay, I need to give the private IP, not the public IP here. I'll change it here now. Uh, I think it has created two. I need to give the private network, not the public. Okay, let me delete them. Okay, so let me add it again. Earlier, okay, so once we choose the backend pool, right? Okay, so it is directly allowing us to choose the VMs directly, which are part of this particular network. But I think they made certain changes here, it seems. Backend pool configuration NIC. Okay, it is not allowing me. That's fine. So let me go with the IP address only. Here, okay, let me pass the private IPs of the VMs. So this is my private IP of my VM. Let me copy it and put it here. Same way, I'll go ahead here, and this is my private IP. Okay, so let me click on add now. And now I have added both the network, both the VMs. Okay, so into this particular load balancer backend pool. As soon as it is done, if I go ahead and do a refresh, this particular public IP will be keep changing, I think. Let's do that. Okay, so which is already running is not changed. Let me do refresh on the top ones. Okay, both are keeping same, that is fine. Let's see. Let me go to the health probe. So here, okay, we need to create a certain health probe and which port or protocol, okay, the traffic, incoming traffic is coming. So for our web servers, okay, so we are getting a port number 80, right? Because it's a HTTP traffic. Okay, so I need to define that particular as a health probe here. Let's say I'll create a health probe here, and I'll create a I'll just name it as a health probe itself, and it's a TCP protocol. And since it is a standard load balancer, it also supports HTTPS. In case of basic, it will not support HTTPS. So port number, okay, we are keeping a 80 because my web server is running on a port number 80. And we need to keep these two intervals. Okay, for every 5 seconds, okay, if you get any two consecutive failures, okay, so by default, okay, the traffic will be routed back to the another server. Okay, this is the rule, okay, that I'm keeping, okay, as part of my health probe. Once again, I'm repeating. So for every interval of 5 items, let's say if I keep the server here, the amount of time between the probe attempts. Okay, that means, okay, the traffic will be attempts to for every 5 seconds. Okay, if you get a two failures, okay, by default the traffic will be routed back to the another server. Okay, so this is what, okay, health probe we are keeping. So let me click on add for now. So now I'm done with adding a health probe also. So after creating a health probe, okay, now I'll go ahead and create the load balancing rules as well. So yeah, I have created a health probe. Okay, so it is running on a port 80. Now I need to create a certain load balancing rule. So okay, let me click on add. Without having health probe, we cannot create a load balancing rule. Let's say I will just simply say it as LB rule, and the version is okay. I'm using a IPv4, and I need to choose the front end IP. So this is the front end IP that I'm going to use. When I use this particular front end IP and a port 80, okay, so it should be routing the traffic to the backend port. Okay, backend port also will be running on a port 80. So I need to choose the backend port. Okay, and here, okay, I'll be choosing this particular health probe. And if at all, if I wanted to go with any session persistence, this is for the routing the traffic to the different IP and protocols. Okay, this I wanted to discuss at this moment. And rest of the details, okay, let's go with the default. So what this particular load balancer rule does is, okay, so when I try to access the servers, okay, and using this particular front end IP of the load balancer, which is running on a port 80, and in the backend also it will be routing the traffic on a port 80 itself. And okay, I'm adding a backend pool of these particular servers, which I have given as a backend pool, and here I have added to my two VMs, and I have created health for V80. So let me click on add it now. So now I'm done with creating a health probe, adding a backend pools, and creating the load balance and rules as well. So once it is done, okay, we'll go ahead and test it now. Yeah. So this particular NAT rules, okay, we do not require at this moment. Okay, let's focus on these four now. So I'll go back to the overview page, and if I try to access this particular application using this particular public IP, I should be able to navigate the traffic to the different load balancers. So let's say I'll go back here, and I'll put this particular IP, and let me click on enter. And if you see, by default, okay, traffic is routed back to the VM2. Let's say currently traffic is default routed to the VM2, and okay, for every 5 seconds, okay, if you get a two consecutive failures, okay, currently just for a demo, I cannot show that, okay, huge traffic. For that, okay, what I will do is I will just turn off the VM2. Okay, just stop the VM2. Okay, so when I stop the VM2, that means, okay, VM2 is not available, and whenever the traffic is routed back to the VM2, okay, it will get the failure notification, and by default the traffic will be routed back to the VM1. Let's see that now. Can you see? This time traffic is routed back to the VM1. Okay, similarly I'll go back to the here, and it is still stopping. I would have restarted instead of stop. Okay, so now I'm able to route the traffic to the only VM1 because my VM2 is in a shutdown mode. Okay, so that is how, okay, based on the health conditions and availability, the traffic will be default routed back to the multiple healthy backend servers with the help of this particular load balancer. Let's say I'll turn on this particular VM2 again. Now I'll go back and stop the VM1. So now VM1 will be goes into the shutdown mode. That means, okay, it will be not available. And if I do refresh, and since both the servers are not available, okay, I'm getting this error. So once the VM2 is up, because I just started the VM2, so the by default, okay, traffic will be routed back to the VM2. So let's see this now. And if you see here, okay, so I started my VM2, and it took some time to start the V server, and by default traffic is routing back to the VM2 now. Okay, so this is how, okay, it will check the condition, and like if it is available. Okay, so upon the availability, okay, the traffic will be routed back to the default servers. Okay, so let's come back here, and if you keep do refresh, okay, again it will be in a VM2 only. So this is how, okay, so we can route the traffic to the multiple backend pools or healthy servers. Okay, so by using the concept called load balancer. Okay, this is, okay, a public load balancer, whereas, okay, we are using the front public IP, okay, as a front end IP. So in case of internal load balancer, okay, we'll be using it, okay, to route the traffic to the backend pool of databases. Whereas, okay, we are using the internal public, I mean, like a private IP. Okay. So this is pretty much about the load balancer. So today, maybe, like you can go through the rest of the things here. Okay, certain documents. Let me quickly walk you through the certain documents here. So when I go to the load balancer document here, so here you could see an overview page what exactly this particular load balancer is about. So load balancer refers to evenly distributing a load across the group of backend resource servers. Okay, you could see okay, the same thing whatever we discussed till now, and the different scenarios as well. Okay, why do we use the load balancer? Okay, and you can see there advantages and secure by default. And for creating a load balancer, you can go this thing. Okay, how we can create, okay, using a standard SKU, and how we can create using basic SKU. So when you create a basic SKU, the entire number of VM should be part of single availability set. But whereas, okay, so when you go out and create a standard SKU, okay, there is no need of being in a same availability set. And this is what, okay, exactly we have done. We have created a load balancer, and for this load balancer we had a public IP, and this VMs, okay, we have added as a backend pool of this particular load balancer. And if at all, if I wanted to access the application which is hosted on this particular servers, I'm accessing them using my public IP. Okay, and this entire setup should be part of in a same network. If you create in a different network, it will not work. Okay, so here you could see how to create it, and step by step procedures. Okay, what we this is what, okay, I have created everything. Okay, how to create a backend pool, how to create a health probe, and how to create a load balancing rules, and how to create a backend servers and VMs, networks, everything. Okay, and this is what, okay, so we are getting, okay, so here, okay, they are enabling a separate web server, and they are keeping certain different HTML page, okay, to have the hello world page. Okay, so the same thing, okay, so you can achieve it, okay, using PowerShell also. Okay, so how to create a same kind of setup using PowerShell, you can go through this, try to do with the PowerShell also. Okay, you could see complete standard, creating a standard load balancer. This is the complete PowerShell script, basics PowerShell script. Try to understand first, okay, so how we are creating manually, and what are all the options, okay, we are giving, okay, for creating that, and how we